Senator from New Jersey.
Thank you for recognizing me, Mr. President. I'm rising today to speak about the judicial nominations that are currently pending before the Senate and the fact that we have a very serious vacancy crisis in the United States. We have a challenge based upon the unwillingness for the majority to put on the floor a number of judges that are pending and have been pending for many, many months. This is a serious problem, and it's causing a problem in states all around the country. And we have critical challenges in performing our role of helping the judiciary, that independent branch of government, to function. I would be wrong not to mention Judge Merrick Garland's nomination to the Supreme Court, which has now been pending before the Senate for 7 months. This is the longest period in United States history that a judge has been pending, not only for an up or down vote, but also pending just to have hearings on the qualifications of this judge. This judge would absolutely bring great qualifications. In fact, nobody has had more federal experience, but yet we refuse to move forward to go through a process that is spelled out in the Constitution in the sense that we are supposed to make sure that the judiciary branch has a full complement of judges. So for 7 months now, the Supreme Court has not been functioning as it was intended by the Constitution. The Supreme Court's missing a justice, and because of that vacancy, cases have resulted in 4-4 tie votes. As a result of those 4-4 decisions, we lack a national precedent in cases that could guide lower courts, bringing resolutions that are necessary for ordinary Americans who go before our justice system seeking justice as was intended in the Constitution. It's challenging in providing certainty to businesses. It's challenging in providing the regular course of many Americans' life. The Supreme Court's next term begins in just 2 weeks. It seems like we'll be out in recess, but they again will be trying to do the business intended of the court. I do not believe that there's any justifiable reason why this distinguished body should not confirm Justice Garland, but frankly, even go through the process of having hearings and ultimately having a vote. The Supreme Court was intended to have 9 justices. We are not doing our job. Justice Garland would not be the first to be confirmed in the month of September, not the first to be confirmed during a presidential election. In fact, a total of 13 Supreme Court justices have been confirmed in the month of September, including Chief Justice Roberts, William Rehnquist, Justice Antonin Scalia, and Sandra Day O'Connor. This inaction of ours is putting the Supreme Court at a disadvantage. The disadvantage is not the Supreme Court, it's actually ours as the American people. We know across the country, though, that federal judges at other levels of the judiciary are facing a real crisis. They're overworked and they're understaffed because of a judicial vacancy crisis. We now face 90 judicial vacancies in our courts across the country, and 34 of them have actually been declared judicial emergencies. Now, this is not a subjective declaration. This is an objective declaration. In the United States of America right now, there are 34 judicial emergencies. In contrast to previous administrations, by the end of September 2008, in the last year of the Bush administration, Democrats had reduced those vacancies, not where we are right now, 90 judicial vacancies, but reduced those vacancies all the way down to 34. In addition to Judge Garland's Supreme Court nomination, 30 nominations which are currently pending on the Senate executive calendar, all except 2 of whom were voted out of committee by unanimous vote, bipartisan manner, us working together. This includes 20 district court nominees that were put forth in this bipartisan spirit. There are nominees pending on the executive calendar from states including Tennessee, New Jersey, New York, California, Rhode Island, Pennsylvania, Hawaii, Utah, Massachusetts, Maryland, Oklahoma, Wisconsin, Louisiana, Indiana, North Dakota, South Carolina, and Idaho. These are red states and blue states and purple states. These are our states here in our country. I believe it's time to act on people that are well qualified. I believe it's time for us to act on people that have bipartisan support, names that have come in recommendations to the presidents by Republicans and Democrats, 2 of whom were approved by voice vote, all of whom, except for 2, were confirmed approved by voice vote. 2 weeks ago, I joined with several of my colleagues who all came to the Senate floor to ask for consent for the Senate to begin voting on nominees pending on the Senate executive calendar. Senators have the right to vote yes or no on those nominees, but we believe they should be at least brought to the Senate floor. In rejecting our request, Senate Republicans made the counteroffer for the Senate to vote on a package of nominees. At that time, they were skipping over the next two in line. I know there's been some more discussion about that, but the reality is I cannot support skipping one of the longest standing judicial nominees, Judge Julian Neal's, in New Jersey, where there is now a judicial emergency, where the people who are suffering, folks who, I don't know what their political backgrounds are, but these are business people, these are citizens who are now facing unbelievably long waits as a result of this judicial emergency. Nominations are from red and blue states. This is a time, I believe, where we should act in a way that belies that partisan rancor that is so often associated with this body. By voting on these nominees, the Senate would follow the regular order, something that many of us are calling for, regardless of who's in power here on the Senate floor. We should be moving on the longest pending nominees on the floor. And so I rise today to make a request, to humbly make the request for unanimous consent, that the Senate proceed to executive session to consider the following nominations. Calendar numbers 359, 362, 363, 364, 459, 460, and 461. That the Senate proceed to vote without intervening action or debate on the nominations in the order listed. That the motions to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table with no intervening action or debate, that no further motions be in order to the nominations, that any related statements be printed in the record, and that the President be immediately notified of the Senate's action, and that the Senate then resume its legislative session.
Is there objection?
Mr. President.
Republican leader.
Reserving the right to object. Reserving the right to object. The senator from New Jersey and I had a similar exchange a couple of weeks ago, and as I pointed out then, the Senate has treated President Obama fairly with respect to his judicial nominations. As of now, the Senate has already confirmed 329 of President Obama's judicial nominees. That is more judicial nominees confirmed than President Bush had during all of his 8 years. Now, I'll be objecting shortly, but we've been entering into agreements to process additional nominees on a bipartisan basis. Our Democratic colleagues objected to the last proposal I made a couple of weeks ago, but I'm prepared to offer another one. My proposal includes many of the nominees who are included in the proposal from the junior senator from New Jersey. It would include a judicial nominee from Tennessee, 2 nominations from Pennsylvania, and a Utah nomination. So I will ask consent that the Senate proceed to executive session to consider individually the following nominations at time to be determined by the majority leader in consultation with the Democratic leader. Calendar number 359, 460, 461, and 569, that there be 30 minutes for debate only on each nomination, equally divided in the usual form, and that upon the use or yielding back of time on the respective nomination, the Senate proceed to vote without intervening action or debate on the nomination with no other business in order.
Is there objection to the modification?
Mr. President, reserving the right to object.
Senator from New Jersey.
Mr. President, I have not been in the Senate that long. When I came to the Senate, there were just months left when the Democrats were in the majority. And I'm sure as the pendulum swings back and forth, I will be in the majority again and may have a chance to show true to what I'm about to say. But I cannot imagine that I would support what I see going on right now if the Democrats were in the majority. When I read the Constitution, it makes no claim to political parties or tit for tat, or we should have one president that gets a certain number of nominees versus another president getting another one? Should we add up the Republican presidents of the last century and the Democratic presidents of the last century and somehow compare the total number of judges? That was not the intention of the Constitution. There is a branch of government that's independent of ours that we are strangling right now through our inaction. Any objective understanding of the functioning of the American government should clearly state that one branch should not strangle the operations of another, undermining what is clearly in the best interest of the people. This is not a partisan tit for tat. Bush had this much, Obama has this much. This is about the fact that we have a proliferation of judicial emergencies, that there are businesses, that our very economy actually is being undermined because businesses can't get a fair hearing before the judicial branch. It actually is written clearly, this idea of having a justice system that works in a timely fashion. This seems to be an affront to what the purpose of this body is spelled out in the Constitution. I can't go in partisan tit for tat. That's just not in my blood on an issue that to me is so fundamentally spelled out in the Constitution. Now, we're measuring how many Bush had versus how many that Obama had. Clearly, there are so many more vacancies that happen to come up to the course under the Obama administration. 90 vacancies versus what we had in the Bush administration, which were significantly less. Now, it would be one thing if these nominations were clearly partisan, but these nominations are coming from red states and blue states. They're coming from Republican senators, recommendations to the president, mind you, and Democratic senators. And so if we are to indulge in a partisan analysis of this, the offer that was given by the Republican leader is for states that are red and purple states. Now, I represent New Jersey. I have the longest or second longest pending judge on the floor, a qualified judge, a judge with an incredible history of service and sacrifice to country and community, a judge that happens to be African American in a state that urgently needs diversity on the bench as well. I heard a lot of talk when I first got here, and again, I'm new, but people talking about how important regular order is. Why are we skipping judges and not going through the regular order? I have tremendous respect for the majority leader and the pressures that he faces on a daily basis, but this I cannot understand. When I read the Constitution, I cannot understand why this body is so strangling the functioning of that other body, and why my state is dealing with this judicial emergency. Unnecessarily so, when I came here, was instructed what to do, and have been following regular order to fill this seat in New Jersey. So I respectfully object to the majority leader's motion. The request for unanimous consent.
Objection's been heard to the modification.
And if I can be recognized...
Is there an objection to the original request?
I object.
Objection is heard.
And I would just then like to continue, as I said earlier. Julia Niels, who I was proud to recommend to President Obama, as well as somebody who's right there, the next two jurists, Stanton from Tennessee, are well-qualified jurists, are the only two African Americans on the long list of the next 15. Both of these men have demonstrated skill, earned distinction, and they have incredible careers, legal careers. Right now, the second longest nomination pending on the floor is Judge Julia Niels, who was first nominated well over a year ago, in fact, 19 months ago. He's been nominated to fill what is now a judicial emergency, as I stated, which means, more specifically, that the caseload is extraordinarily high, that other good public servants in our state are doing their best to keep up, but cannot, where the course of justice is being perverted. The people of New Jersey deserve better from us as a body, and this seat should be filled. It's an act of simple justice. It's an act of mercy at this point. A hearing was held on his nomination in September of 2015, and his nomination was passed out of committee in November of 2015. Since that time, Judge Neal's nomination has been sidelined by this body. Judge Neal's has incredibly strong qualification, and more than that, this is a man that I know his family, I've seen up close and personal the sacrifices he's made. It's no surprise that the American Bar Association Standing Committee on the Federal Judiciary has unanimously rated Judge Neal's as well qualified to be a district court, the highest possible rating he got. Judge Neal's has extensive legal experience, a distinguished judicial career, an unwavering commitment to justice, private sector experience. As an attorney, Judge Neal's worked both in the public service, as I knew him, but before that has a distinguished private practice. He's most recently been a county counsel in Bergen County, and I know the county executive there who raves about him, but understands the higher calling and aspirations he has to be a judicial district court judge. Judge Neal's has an impressive breadth of judicial experience. He graduated from Morehouse College and Emory University School of Law. He started his career as a law clerk on the New Jersey Superior Court. Later, Judge Neal served as chief judge of the Newark Municipal Court. That's how I got to know him. Judge Neal's also has an unwavering commitment to justice, a balanced view. He is a moderate man. At a time when our nation is working to address so many complicated issues, I believe we need this man on the bench. I believe he would make all of us proud, not Republican or Democrat, but Americans. Judge understands the issues. He understands scholarship. He has demonstrated his worth, his aptitude, his thoughtfulness. This is the kind of guy I think all of us would want on the bench. There's no credible reason why we're not moving forward. Besides partisanship, I just can't see it. So I would like to rise again and make this request then for unanimous consent, that the Senate proceed to executive session to consider the following nominations. Regular order would mean that we would go to these two judges who happen to be qualified African Americans. Regular order would bring us to these long-standing men who've been sitting on the sidelines now for well over a year. I ask for us to proceed to executive session to consider these following nominations, calendar numbers 359 and 362, that the Senate proceed to vote without intervening action or debate on the nominations in the order listed, that the motions to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table with no intervening action or debate, that no further motion be in order to the nominations, that any related statements be printed in the record, and that the President be immediately notified of the Senate's action, and the Senate then resume legislative session.
Is there objection?
Object.
Objection is heard.
Mr. President, I'm grateful for the time. I'm hoping that in the intervening hours and days that we are here in Washington, D.C., that this profound obligation we have of keeping the functioning of three branches of government, that we can give some attention to that and perhaps solve this impasse. Thank you. I yield the floor and note the absence of a quorum.